My humble respect to Guru Mahan, Guru Piran Sivasankaran, Guru Piranyo, fellow Jnanis. Today I'm going to continue with Mahan's I God philosophy, particularly the I principle, the first principle, which is a very important concept. This is part 7. Um, I'm going to take one of Swamiji's quotes and go into very detail with showing some clear evidence on some of Mahan's ideas and concepts. So here today we are going to look at universality in diversity. Part of this is essentially starting with Mahan's quote that he has in this chapter, that he says, "I am thee, thou art I, thyself and myself are nothing but the same I." So in Tamil, he says, "Niye nan, nane ni, niyum nanum, nane nan." So this concept that we are all one, there is no two. And this caught, many people's attention. It also caught my attention when I first started my journey. And the question that one would have is that, how can all of us be the same? How can different things be the same? And what is this oneness? And he's talking about. And because all we see is a lot of diversity and varieties and differences. So we see the differences in the universe. We see different galaxies, different planets, different suns. You look at the sky and you see multitudes of lights out there. And as you probe it more and deeper, they all are very, very different. So we see that no one planet are the same. No one galaxy is the same. They all look very, very different. In that same way, when we look at our own nature, we see that so many varieties of plants, plant species. We see many, many varieties of insects. We see many varieties of animals. We see many varieties of people with different colors, different, personalities, different complexions, different way of thinking. So, and no two person is the same. Even when we see twins, we see that though they may look the same, but they are not the same. So with all these varieties and diversities, how do we reconcile this statement that I am thee and thou art I? Thyself and myself are nothing but the same I. So what is Swamiji saying this? What is he saying here? And let's probe this a little bit more deeper. So we see that, we want to be able to understand this concept. What is this oneness that he's speaking about that we don't see? We can't cognize. All we're seeing is differences and diversity. So this is where this notion of Swami say, true, noka, exploring intensively, with an attentive mind. And this is what we saw in the last class, that while we see, differences in mindset, differences in people at the cellular level, they look very similar, and as we go deeper and deeper, we see that ultimately we come to the light and vibration and this Irul, and ultimately we see that big I. So Swamiji says that, this big I is responsible for everything from vibrations to light and to cognize this, one needs to get into that subtle state of existence. So the mind needs to get into the subtle state of existence to be able to understand this. And we spoke about this, and when one who understands this, they see that they're able to see God in its entirety, God in this different manifestation, at the surface level being different and diverse, at the cellular level, at the proton level, and light, and vibrations, and ultimately the most subtlest of which is the higher order continuum, or this big I state. So Swamiji was speaking from the most subtlest platform or dimension. And when I go back and start looking at from a different platform, I see differences. So hence, to be able to get to that platform, one needs to make that inner journey, to be able to have that utru trunoka noka, which is the intensive, focus inward, to be able to see that building blocks of existence. So, and this is what is enabled him to say, we are one. You see, there is no two. So we saw that in that mindset. So the mind needs to go deep into that state. And when the mind goes there, the mind, an ordinary mind would see a plant differences, but a Mahan would see there is no difference between the plant and me in that subtlest level. So when we explore this more deeper, you see that within the plant species, an ordinary mind would see differences. So it sees, on the surface, there are so many different plants, varieties, infinitude of plants in different shapes and sizes and colors, and you know so when we are in that small eye state, we look different on that surface. The surface have different waves, different frequencies, and that manifests the differences in what we see and what we cognize. But at the core, we are all the same. At the core of the waves, or the on the surface of the ocean, at the core, we see we are the same. And this is what Swamiji was talking about, which is the big I state. So as long as the mind is in the surface, at the small I level, we will see the differences. You see, and this is what. How do we get there? The same thing we see with insects. We see multitude of insects. You know, from the beetle to the bees to the butterflies to the grasshoppers, they all look very different. But as we, maybe in the cellular level, they'll also look very different. But as we go deeper and deeper and deeper, ultimately, we come to the strings. It's quite interesting, the vibration. And, what our vibration is will determine what our mind is, that our mind vibration and the illumination of our mind, and how our cellular structure of our brain. So science also says that every movement of that vibration creates different atoms and different molecules. So even within that strings and even within the vibration, different vibrations results in different, atomic structure that leads to the differences that we see on that surface. But going even more deeper than that vibrations or string, we have that higher order dimension where everything is the same. So we see that though the insects are very different, we see that at the core, the big I is the same for the plants and for the insects. Right? So, and the same thing we see for animals. We see multitude of animals. The only concern is that now we see that because of human activity, many of them are becoming extinct. I'm not sure when the humans will become extinct, but the trajectory we are going, it's not far off. But whatever said and done, we see that nature presents us with so much varieties of animals, from the whales to the tigers to the leopards to, monkeys to gorillas, and that evolution ultimately led to us too. So at the surface level, we see that we are very different, right? But as we go deeper and deeper in our genetic level, maybe we are different too. Genetic codes, they say that the genetic code between Homo sapiens and the chimpanzee is only 1% difference, right? So there are some differences in the genetic codes, DNA. So as we go deeper and deeper at the higher order, the differences between the chimpanzee and us and all the other animals are the same. So again, Swamiji is alluding to this oneness of nature, oneness of this big I, or the cosmic intelligence he's talking about. In that same way, Swamiji talks about, understanding. If we have that full understanding of this big I, and if we are able to understand it, become aware of it, feel it, enable that reverberation of the cosmic symphony in our mind. And when our mind is inoculated by this big eye, we see that the mind's lens sees everything with this oneness. And we have this complete wholesome experience. When we see the plants, we see ourselves in it. When I say self, this is this big eye I'm talking about. When we see the insects, we see the self in it, ourself in it. When we see all the other animals, we see the self in it. So we see that all these are part and parcel of us. Even science also says this. If you see in terms of the evolution, it says that we Homo sapiens were an evolution of from one cell right up to all the evolution of the animals right up to where we are. And we probably are continuing to evolve. So that evolution continues. And we see that the building block on the surface may be very different, but in that final building block, the higher order continuum is the same. So the same thing with humanity itself. If you take humanity itself, we see diversity in humanity. We see people of different colors, shape, demeanor, texture, a whole range of multitude. So we see diversity also in humanity, right? And this is really very interesting. So we see that the universe, which started off with this primordial atom, has expansion. So we see that multitude of energy and atomic particles that has led to multitudes, infinitude of planets and all the things in the universe, and that is imprinted in everything, including in our biology. So if you see the human nature, we have people of diverse cultures, diverse background, diverse biology. See, so the biology is diverse, our thinking is diverse, that shapes our cultures and our values and our personalities. So we see diversity. So where does this, the oneness come? And this is the part that is really important, because there are some important lessons that we can learn. So at the small I level, we see differences. And sometimes these differences are magnified. And sometimes when the differences are magnified, we tend to, there are positive things when there are differences, because the genetic pool will, cross, procreate, and the genetic pool becomes stronger and stronger. So the biology says that, the more crossbreeding, we see the best of both comes in and they become stronger. And if it's remaining in its own genetic pool, we see that the flaws are magnified. So nature's imprinted the differences to give resilience to the biological beings, right? So we see that, within the diversity nature's imprinted, there are some strengths. But within that diversity also, we see that there are some challenges and difficulties, because sometimes diversities make people, there are conflicts between people. We have, tribes forming, and we see people of different belief systems. So we see also those challenges. So this is where Mahans and other great saints come and say, hey, we are diverse, but there is something there's a thread that, keeps us all connected. And what is that thread? And if we knew that thread, perhaps maybe we'll be able to live in more peaceful ways, right? So this is where Mahan's, the universal peace sanctuary idea comes, that this big I, at the big I level, we see oneness in that diversity. And this is really important. So while nature has imprinted diversity for the reasons, as I mentioned earlier, to build resilience and expansion in everything, both from the planetary systems right up to animals and plants and human beings, no difference, right? But there are also challenges. Even in the animal kingdom, you see that, there are tribes, that fight and for survival, right? So nature's imprinted both, right? But as human beings, somebody says that because we are thinking, we are able to think, we are able to then not just look at diversity, but look at the oneness in that diversity and build upon the strength of the diversity, not have conflicts and challenges. Mahan lived through a period where he went through the First World War and the Second World War. So, and he has seen those conflicts, and this is where a lot of his thinking also has shaped him. So, say, how can we stand on a common platform where we celebrate the diversity, but we also celebrate that oneness that keeps us together? And this is where the Irul concept, the higher order concept of the big I is very important. So divinity is celebrating universality in diversity. So divinity is about celebrating universality in diversity. So when we say divinity, it's about, wow, we have all these differences, but the differences all come from the same place. So we are all of the same family with diverse things that we can learn from one another, and become more and more resilient, both as a biological being, as an intellectual being, and also as a social being. Right. So this is where the thinking of this thou art. So thou I am thee and thou art I is that oneness concept of this big I. So why do we have this conflict? So in spite of all this, the theology speaks about the oneness and diversity. All great philosophies talk about this, but yet we see conflicts. You open the newspaper, you see conflicts. You open the social media, you see conflicts. Individual conflicts in families, conflicts in among neighbors, conflicts in society, conflicts among countries where people are killed, there's famine. So why have we not understood this, right? And this is where the teachings of Mahan is very important. We see that sometimes even the subjective understanding of God becomes, a point of differences, and a point of not being a point of unification and diversity. So again, somebody says, as we become more and more enlightened by who we are at the most subtlest level, we see that all rivers lead to the same ocean. The focus is to become that ocean, to be that ocean. So this is where, to be able to resolve these conflicts, intellectual level alone is not, intellectual level and the abstract understanding is not enough. One needs to experience it and feel it. And this is where Swamiji, couples his theology with the practice of this oneness, this meditational practice. So you see, in many places, they say it is, we all should be one and peaceful. That's the place you have a lot of conflicts. So the theology doesn't go with the practice on the ground. And this is where Mahan's philosophy says that universal peace can only take place if individual is at peace. And that when the individual is at peace, you see that he can permeate a family that is at peace, a community that is at peace, a nation that is at peace. So we see that to be able to do that, one needs to attain a quietude in the mind. And to attain that, the quietude is very important to attain that clarity of thought, the concentration, the creativity, and also the conscientiousness, to be able to see that we are all one. What we do to others is same as doing to what we don't want to do things to others that others should do to us. So it is that conscientiousness that is really important in creating this oneness. So for that, one needs to practice this introspection, contemplation, reflection, and meditation, to be able to cognize that cosmic symphony that is running through our biology, running through our mind, which is the core to our DNA. But for the mind to be able to cognize this, the mind needs to be at peace, the mind needs to be calm, the mind needs to be at a state of quietude or silence. So, why is it that we can't do this? We see that the mind is drenched, mind that is drenched in materiality is unable to cognize that cosmic symphony because we see, so look at the waves of our mind, it's all over, right? And in the process, we don't cognize that symphony. You know, you take a human mind and if you track it from morning, it is all over, meandering everywhere. And I trace this, back and forth, and you see that in that process, that symphony, you can't read, you can't cognize that cosmic symphony. And this is what an ordinary human being sees. He he or she sees there's something there, but that symphony is blocked by the waves of that materiality. And this is the problem, that because of this, we gravitate towards our material identity, which is differences, the values are differences. So we say our mind is the best, yours is not so good. So it's that, conflicts that lead to a lot of turbulence. So what does great saints like Mahan do? He says, practice that introspection, contemplation, reflection, and meditation. He says, Unarvu Gavanipa. You see, in all this turbulence, you see that white word called cosmic symphony, that we can't read it through, we can't cognize it. You say, hold on to that white thing there that is being buried by that waves there. Hold on to it. Anchor it into your third eye and your crest eye. Practice that 21 days. And you see that slowly the waves start settling. And you see that you start cognizing that cosmic intelligence. You can see it better, you can feel it better, but yet you still have that material thoughts running up and down. And you can see that the cosmic symphony can be cognized, glimpses that you can read it now. Before you could not read it, you could not cognize it. But as the mind goes deeper and deeper, you can see, hey, there is a cosmic intelligence, but yet I'm riding these waves, right? You can cognize it. And the beautiful part is that as we go from that higher beta to a much more, subtle vibration, as our meditation, our tapas intensifies, you see that the waves are still there, but now you can see, cognize the cosmic intelligence better. Your mind becomes more calmer, and ultimately there comes a stage where it just disappears. It just completely enveloped and enraptured by that cosmic intelligence. So you see that the cosmic intelligence comes to the main stage, and all the material vibration, it's there, but it's gone to the background. You don't cognize it. Whereas in the earlier, you see both, and here you see that the material thoughts are magnified, it drowns that cosmic intelligence. So as we intensify our tapas, we see that ultimately we come to that big I state. And what's really interesting is that the diversity becomes universality in the diversity. Though we are diverse, you see that universal big I imprinted in everything. The day one achieves this, that is the day that you see that you propitiate philosophies such as Mahan. You would not say, because I was born in a particular, this is the reality. You step away from that, all, the diverse experiences, though people are different, though the philosophies are different, though the cultural values are different, we see that the core is the same. The values are the same. They are all the universal values. So you're able to see that universality in the diversity. When that happens, you see your neural pathway completely move from that individual to a more universal identity. Your mind becomes more and more universal. Your mind becomes more and more attuned to that universality. And you see that the knowledge of all humanity and everything that the universe has to offer is opened up, for oneself. So, and this is what Swamiji says. He says that the intellect, will try to understand everything just in front of it. This is what people do in the whatever that is in front. What they can see is what they try to understand and analyze, because that's what we've been taught. It's the object world. You see, everything we see, seeing is believing. You see, so what we don't see, we say, okay, well, not important. It's so we've been conditioned to do that. But the intellect shudders to understand itself, because that requires effort. Because in all our lives, we've been taught about the object world. If we are lucky, our parents and our gurus teaches us, hey, the material world is great, but there is a substratum underneath, a subtle substratum that animates all this. Know that too, right? That's what being universal means, knowing both the material and the spiritual, right? So, but our material mind is so caught up and to some extent lazy to dwell deeper, because it's effort. Whenever someone asks Swamiji, how do I attain this? He says, Muerchi pa. He says, effort to make that connection to that cosmic intelligence. And he says that, he who understands himself by his intellect, that means they understand that cosmic vibration. They understand that big I. The effort is taken to slowly reduce that noise day in, day out, and the noise starts settling down and that cosmic vibration comes to the forefront. When that happens, one realizes that God in its entirety, that's what Swamiji says, this big I. So this big I is manifests as everything else in the small I, you see. But sometimes when the mind is so caught up with the small I-ness, it loses its understanding of who it is. So this introspection, contemplation, reflection, and meditation is to reboot that system so that the origin of all this material identity is ignited back to that big I. And this is what Swamiji's I God philosophy is: the distinction between the small I, the smallness, the smallness to do things in our material world, from eating to sleeping to interacting in different ways. Nature's given us that. But all this is powered by a much more grander, cosmic intelligence. And one who understands this is able to power this in every facet of their life, so that the small I engages in this material world in a very illumined and enlightened way. And this is what the path of self-realization, or the I God philosophy that Mahan has left back for all of us, and the roadmap for us to get there. So the question I have all of y'all is that you don't have to look at anything, in terms of, am I getting there? Ask yourself, how universal is your outlook on life? Do you still crave to your own things or your own tribes and your own, or is it much more open, willingness to learn from others, willingness to appreciate others, being more conscientious of others, and that tells you the DNA of our mind. You see, and do you experience that cosmic symphony in your mind, that universal symphony, that you can feel that what Swamiji says, summa irukum sugam. You have that blissful feeling, and when that happens, your hair stands up. You have the connection. Maybe glimpses of that in the early phases, and then after that, you see that you are fully powered by that. Do you experience that? And that is what we should ask this question: why haven't I got this? What is it that I'm doing that I'm not getting that universal outlook or that cosmic symphony, this Bhagavan's Gita? This is the question that the mind should always ask, search, explore, and discover. This is the teachings of Mahan that I learned. Sandosha.